On the evening of December 19th, 1996, a 21-year-old student from the University of Oklahoma, Julie Buskin, found herself immersed in a flurry of activities. As the semester was drawing to a close, she had numerous responsibilities to address before departing from Norman, Oklahoma. Eager to enjoy some quality time with her friends prior to her departure, Julie spent a lively night in their company. By the early hours of December 20th, 1996, she had completed most of her tasks and was on her way back to her apartment, looking forward to a restful night. However, before she could settle in, a tragic event unfolded. A predator was lurking in the vicinity, seeking his next victim, and unfortunately, Julie became his target. That very night, she was taken from the parking lot of her apartment complex just moments after her arrival. Who could have been responsible for Julie's abduction? Would she ever make it back home? Norman, nestled in Cleveland County, Oklahoma, USA, stands as the third most populous city in the state, earning its reputation as a charming college town. Renowned for its affordable housing options, Norman is a haven for families, students, and young professionals alike. It holds the prestigious title of being one of the finest places to reside in the entire United States. The likelihood of falling victim to a violent crime in Norman is a mere 1 in 316, boasting one of the nation's lowest crime rates across communities of all sizes. This makes Norman a sanctuary of safety and tranquility. However, it was in this very town that Julie's tragic destiny unfolded. Born as Julie Buskin on October 24th, 1975, in Benton, Saline County, Arkansas, Julie was raised alongside her two sisters by her loving parents, Mary Jean Buskin and Wilmer Bud Buskin. Affectionately dubbed Julie, the name became her identity. Growing up, Julie's passion for ballet blossomed, fueling her dream of becoming a professional dancer. With a plethora of friends and a reputation as a talented and popular student, Julie's ambition was to teach children, particularly those with special needs, and establish her own dance studio. After graduating from Benton High School in 1993, she pursued ballet studies at the University of Oklahoma College of Fine Arts, aiming to become a prima ballerina. Her dedication to the art of ballet, characterized by rigorous practice and unwavering precision, culminated in a breathtaking performance of Swan Lake on December 13th, 1996, marking her graduation from the university. Following her academic pursuits, Julie intended to return to Benton, preparing to apply for a master's teaching program at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. Julie aspired to become a ballet instructor, envisioning a dance studio where she could impart her passion for ballet to children who shared her enthusiasm for the art form. On the evening of Thursday, December 19th, 1996, she spent time with her friend Ryan James, with whom she worked at the Oklahoma University golf course. After their shift, Julie visited Ryan's grandparents' residence, where they ventured to Walmart so Julie could develop some photographs. They returned to Ryan's home around 7 p.m. for dinner, followed by a movie. The duo also made plans for lunch the following day. Julie lingered at Ryan's until 10 p.m. before heading out to meet other friends. She enjoyed an evening of Monopoly and exchanged Christmas gifts at another friend's house. As she bid farewell, Julie prepared to return home the next day. Having just completed her university course, her roommate, Megan, was present as well, and the two decided to stay up all night, with Julie promising to drive Megan to Will Rogers Airport at 5 a.m. the next morning. They left their friend's house and made their way to a restaurant named The Kettle around 2 a.m. on Friday, December 20th, 1996. After their meal, they stopped at a gas station for fuel and cappuccinos before returning to their apartment shortly after 3 a.m. A little while later, they departed again, heading to the airport around 4:30 a.m., arriving in about 30 minutes. Julie dropped Megan off, who watched as Julie drove away in her Red Eagle Summit, unaware that this would be the last moment anyone would see or hear from her. Approximately 20 miles south of Oklahoma City, at the Norman apartment complex where Julie resided, around 5:30 a.m., at least 3 individuals reported hearing a woman scream in distress. A resident of the same complex quickly dialed 911, explaining that he and his wife had been asleep when they were startled by a loud and terrifying scream emanating from the parking lot. They also overheard a man commanding someone to be quiet and get into a vehicle. Upon receiving the call, detectives from the Norman Police Department promptly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. Detective Rhett Burnett was assigned to the case. During their preliminary inquiries, it became evident that several neighbors had heard the woman scream and had witnessed Julie's car leaving the parking area. One neighbor reported seeing both Julie and the suspect in her vehicle as they departed. This information led the detectives to conclude that Julie had been abducted and taken away in her own car, a Red Eagle Summit. Later that tragic Friday morning, Julie's parents traveled from their home in Arkansas to Oklahoma to assist her in packing her belongings. Upon their arrival, they were informed of the horrific event that had occurred just hours before. The detectives requested Mrs. Merriman, the neighbor who had observed Julie and her abductor, to collaborate with forensic artist Harvey Pratt to create a sketch of the suspect. Mrs. Merriman provided a detailed description of the man she had seen in Julie's car that night. Drawing from her recollection, she described the individual as thoroughly as possible, and soon a sketch was completed. The drawing depicted a young Hispanic male, likely in his college years, with long, dark hair. This sketch was disseminated across various media and news outlets in Oklahoma, with the hope that someone might recognize the individual and provide information that could assist the detectives in their investigation. At 5:30 p.m. on the evening of December 20th, 1996, a mere 12 hours following Julie's mysterious disappearance, her lifeless body was discovered by a diligent fisherman at the serene shores of Lake Stanley Draper. The tragic scene unfolded with more questions than answers, leaving the investigators perplexed. The fisherman promptly alerted the authorities, leading to a swift response from a dedicated team of detectives who arrived at the scene to commence their thorough investigation. The tranquil lake, situated approximately 15 miles from her residence, became the haunting backdrop of a heinous crime. A single gunshot wound to the back of her head revealed the brutal fate that befell Julie. The subsequent autopsy unveiled a .22 caliber bullet lodged in her body, confirming the vicious assault she endured. Disturbing evidence emerged as her pants were found pulled down, and a pink leotard bearing her initials lay abandoned nearby. The leotard, tainted with a foreign bodily fluid, was promptly sent for testing. Despite the challenging weather conditions that compromised some footprints in the red sand, diligent police work led to the identification of size 9 Nike Air Max 2 running shoes. The meticulous examination of shoe patterns captured in photographs provided a crucial lead in the investigation. Julie's missing cell phone and a cherished ring added to the enigma surrounding her tragic demise. Delving into Julie's phone records revealed a chilling detail. The perpetrator had callously used her phone posthumously to make 2 calls, one to check the weather forecast and another to a defunct number. The recovery of a few hair strands, although promising, failed to yield significant breakthroughs. Hours later, Julie's Red Eagle Summit was discovered in a nearby apartment complex parking lot. The same crimson sand that the detective discovered by the lake was also present in the vehicle. This suggested that Julie's assailant had driven the car to this particular parking facility following her murder. Julie's vehicle had not been thoroughly cleansed of fingerprints, yielding a total of 49 prints from the car. While some of these were identifiable, others remained elusive, and none pointed to a viable suspect, rendering the fingerprints largely inconsequential. Despite the detectives possessing a substantial amount of evidence, it fell short of leading them to a potential perpetrator. Consequently, a reward of $70,000 was offered for any information regarding Julie's case. Approximately a month into the investigation, the police received a call from a man named David Kill, who had spotted Julie's car on the night of her demise. He recognized the vehicle after viewing a photograph. The man recounted that he had been driving near the lake when a red car abruptly cut him off. Annoyed, he decided to follow the car for about 5 miles before losing sight of it. Unfortunately, this lead also culminated in yet another dead end for the detectives. Despite assistance from Mrs. Merriman and David Kill, no one could identify the individual in the photograph, and Julie's case grew cold. On December 23, 1996, a memorial service was held in Julie's honor, and she was laid to rest at Memorial Park Cemetery in Oklahoma City. The case was reopened in 2001, 4.5 years after her tragic death, when detectives received a call from a female inmate at the Oklahoma County Jail. She claimed that the police sketch bore a resemblance to one of her former acquaintances, a man named Dennis. The detectives, reignited with hope, believed they might have finally identified Julie's killer. They successfully tracked down Dennis and initiated a new investigation. At the time of Julie's murder, Dennis was employed in construction and resided merely 4 blocks from Julie's apartment. When approached by the detectives for a negotiation, Dennis categorically declined to respond to any inquiries or provide his DNA to the authorities. Subsequently, a court order was secured to obtain a sample of Dennis's DNA, which was then sent for analysis. The results indicated that while Dennis's DNA bore a striking resemblance to that of the suspect, it ultimately did not constitute a match, leading to his exclusion as a suspect. The profile derived from his DNA was alarmingly close to the samples collected from the leotards and underwear worn by the victim at the time. Yet, regrettably, proximity does not equate to a definitive match. Thus, he was dismissed from suspicion. Investigators also scrutinized Dennis's brother, his sole living relative, as a potential suspect, but he too was soon exonerated. The police found it peculiar that Dennis's DNA was so closely aligned with that of the suspect, prompting speculation that a relative of Dennis might have been involved in Julie's tragic demise. Undeterred, the police persisted in their investigation. In June 2001, law enforcement in Oklahoma City collected blood samples from 200 men to conduct DNA tests against evidence gathered from the crime scene 5 years prior. Some individuals were chosen based on their proximity to the victim and prior violent offenses, while others were selected for their resemblance to a police sketch of the suspect. Almost everyone who had any interaction with the victim was considered a suspect. However, each man tested was ultimately cleared. Nevertheless, the detectives remained resolute in their commitment to Julie's case, vowing to continue DNA testing for several more years. The authorities classified Julie's murder as unsolved, allowing the case to grow cold once more. Then, on July 26, 2004, a criminalist from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation made a significant connection between an individual in the combined DNA index system database and Julie's homicide. This individual had been incarcerated for burglary as of May 14, 2003. Thus, his DNA was collected, and the information was readily accessible in the database of the combined DNA index system. The genetic material of this gentleman corresponded to the genetic material extracted from the pink leotard discovered on Julie's body. This individual was recognized as Anthony Castillo Sanchez. Evidently, Anthony had not been a suspect in Julie's homicide for the 7 years and 7 months leading up to the breakthrough. Additionally, there was no indication that Anthony and Julie had any prior acquaintance. A more thorough investigation into Anthony's background unveiled some captivating facts about him. At the time of Julie's murder, Anthony was a mere 18 years old. He resided approximately a mile away from Julie and was known for his thievery. Apart from the genetic evidence, there was no direct link to Anthony Sanchez, but this genetic evidence was all the detectives required. In that same year, on September 21st, 2004, nearly 8 years after Julie's murder, law enforcement apprehended the then 25-year-old Anthony Sanchez in connection to the case. He was detained at Cleveland County Detention Center awaiting his trial. Following his arrest, Anthony was compelled to provide his genetic material as the detectives sought to confirm his involvement in Julie's murder. They submitted Anthony's genetic sample for further analysis. While awaiting the results, the authorities interviewed former girlfriends and acquaintances of Anthony. One ex-girlfriend had noted in her diary in October 1996 that Anthony had gifted her a pair of Nikes and had bought a matching pair for himself. She had written, "Anthony purchased me a new set of Nike shoes, and he bought the same style but for boys." The ex-girlfriend also mentioned that they were Nike Air Max 2 shoes and that Anthony wore a size 9. Another girlfriend of Anthony's, who had cohabited with him, informed the police about a peculiar habit of Anthony's. He and his father would frequently engage in shooting 22mm guns at their residence as a pastime. A search warrant was issued to search Anthony's residence. The authorities' search efforts proved futile as they utilized an X-ray machine and demolished walls in pursuit of evidence. Nevertheless, the landlord took matters into their own hands after the police departed and uncovered a .22 caliber bullet. This bullet bore a striking resemblance to the one discovered at the crime scene where Julie's lifeless body was discovered, complete with identical distinctive grooves. Despite this, the state's expert acknowledged that the pattern was not exclusive, as it could be traced back to bullets manufactured by 6 different companies. The state's witnesses who analyzed shoe prints did not definitively assert that the print matched Anthony's shoe size or type. Upon the arrival of DNA test results, it was revealed that Anthony's DNA was a perfect match to the one found on Julie's leotard. The police's narrative suggested that on December 20th, 1996, Anthony was engaged in a spree of stealing Christmas gifts from parked vehicles when he encountered Julie. Subsequently, Julie was abducted at gunpoint and instructed to drive to a nearby lake, where Anthony proceeded to commit heinous acts against her, resulting in her tragic demise. As he fled the scene, he inadvertently left behind incriminating DNA evidence and footprints. Another crucial revelation came to light when detectives discovered that the out-of-service number dialed from Julie's phone post-murder belonged to one of Anthony's ex-girlfriends, albeit with a minor dialing error that led to the call being redirected to an inactive line. Anthony's trial commenced in February 2006, where he faced charges of first-degree murder and first-degree physical assault. Attorney Sitzman of the prosecution confidently presented the overwhelming DNA evidence linking Anthony to Julie's murder. In addition to this crucial evidence, there was the discovery of a bullet in the wall of Sanchez's former residence, footprints from a Nike Air Max 2 sneaker at the crime scene, and the knowledge that Sanchez could drive a standard transmission vehicle, all pointing to his involvement in the crime. On the other hand, Anthony's defense attorney, Diane Box, argued that the state relied too heavily on DNA evidence and proposed alternative theories, including the possibility of 2 perpetrators. Diane skillfully presented 2 sketches described by witnesses that did not match, casting doubt on the prosecution's case. The trial was intense, with Sitzman speaking for hours, countering the defense's arguments. Ultimately, the jury found Anthony guilty after hours of deliberation. The Honorable William C. Hetherington, district judge, delivered the verdict on June 6, 2006, sentencing Anthony to death for first-degree murder, 40 years for physical assault, and 20 years for another charge. Anthony's emotional outburst in court, denying the murder, led to a dramatic scene as bailiffs intervened. His family's reaction was heartbreaking, with his sister collapsing in tears as he was led away in handcuffs. In 2009, while on death row, Anthony sought a new hearing. A report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation revealed that Anthony's case had aggravating factors, leading to the denial of his request for a new hearing. The detectives were convinced that Julie's murder was particularly brutal and cruel, committed to evade lawful arrest or prosecution, with a lingering possibility of the defendant engaging in violent criminal activities, posing a threat to society. The flyer displays Anthony Sanchez alongside his father, Glenn Sanchez, with a sketch of the alleged murderer of Julie Buskin in between. The legal team of the death row inmate now argues that the wrong Sanchez was imprisoned. By 2023, significant progress had been made in Anthony's case. His spiritual advisor, Dr. Jeff Hood, and attorneys Mark Barrett and Greg Gardner firmly believe in their client's innocence, pointing the finger at the suspect's father, Thomas Glenn Sanchez, as the true culprit. Consequently, Anthony's legal representatives filed for a new evidentiary hearing on Friday, February 3, 2023. They emphasized that the only connection between Anthony and the crime was a disputed DNA match, while evidence excluding Anthony was more compelling. Out of the 49 fingerprints recovered from Julie's vehicle, none matched Anthony. Additionally, 2 eyewitnesses failed to identify Anthony as the murderer during their testimonies. Mrs. Merriman's sketch of the suspect closely resembled a 1996 photo of Thomas Glenn Sanchez, Anthony's father. Furthermore, various physical evidence, including hair strands, failed to implicate Anthony. There was a conspicuous absence of any incriminating remarks from Anthony, and none of the items taken from Julie's vehicle were found in his possession. Following his arrest, the evidence landscape revealed DNA findings juxtaposed with various facts that cast doubt on Anthony Sanchez's culpability. The question of Anthony's guilt arose when one of Thomas's former partners came forward with pivotal information. It was uncovered by Anthony's legal team that from July 2020 onward, Glenn Sanchez had claimed responsibility for the murder of Julie Buskin. In a startling confession, Anthony's father admitted to the crime. Approximately 8 months earlier, on December 20th, 2022, Charlotte Beatty, a former girlfriend of Glenn Sanchez, disclosed that Glenn had confessed to her that he was the one who had taken Julie's life. Beatty recounted to Dr. Jeff Hood that prior to Thomas's tragic death on April 24, 2022, he had repeatedly confessed to her about killing Julie Buskin. She recalled first hearing Thomas's admission several years prior, in July 2020, and noted that he continued to mention it, even during sober moments. At that time, she felt too intimidated by Thomas to share this information with anyone. She also recounted his disturbing remarks about how he should have concealed Julie's body more effectively. Beatty vividly remembered a moment when Thomas threatened her, warning that if she revealed anything about Julie's case, he would kill her as he had done to Julie. She described Anthony as a boy who had to fend for himself, while Thomas, an alcoholic, often directed his rage towards her, which she detailed in harrowing terms. Kathy Hodge, Anthony's stepmother, who married Thomas in 1980 when Anthony was just over a year old, recounted the abuse she endured throughout their 14-year marriage. There were instances when Thomas brandished a firearm towards her on multiple occasions. The legal representatives of Anthony argued that there existed considerable grounds to suspect that Anthony's father, Glenn Sanchez, was the individual responsible for the demise of Julie Buskin. They asserted that Beatty's assertion regarding Glenn Sanchez's alleged confession should be evaluated alongside the previous irregularities in the case against Anthony. The attorneys maintained that the mere presence of a person's DNA at a crime scene did not suffice to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Furthermore, they emphasized that in light of the scant evidence against Anthony Sanchez, combined with the substantial reasons to question his culpability, his conviction and sentence ought to be annulled, as there was compelling evidence supporting his innocence. Upholding Anthony's conviction would constitute a violation of the federal Constitution. Given the emerging inquiries, Anthony's legal team proposed that the court should, at the very least, conduct an evidentiary hearing to delve deeper into the claim of innocence and ascertain whether additional evidence could be uncovered implicating Thomas Glenn Sanchez as the true perpetrator of Julie's murder. Ballard, the investigator engaged by Anthony's counsel, scrutinized the handling and profiling of the DNA evidence in the case. He expressed concerns regarding the reliability of the testing and results, noting that the technology employed at the time of testing Anthony's DNA sample was still in its nascent stages. He advocated for a reevaluation of the testing. In February 2023, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation compared Thomas Glenn's DNA with that recovered from Julie's leotard, concluding that the samples did not match. Subsequently, in April 2023, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals delivered a unanimous 5-0 decision against Anthony, dismissing the assertion that his father, Thomas Glenn, was responsible for Julie Buskin's death in 1996. In a decisive ruling, Judge David Lewis stated, "Indeed, upon reviewing the remaining evidence, even if Glenn Sanchez had confessed his guilt while testifying under oath during Anthony Sanchez's murder trial, no reasonable fact finder would have acquitted Anthony Sanchez of the murder of Julie Buskin." Supporters of Anthony have raised concerns regarding the DNA evidence that led to his conviction, alleging it was improperly handled and manipulated. They contend that other evidence, particularly ballistic findings, lacked a credible connection to Anthony. Since the jury rendered its verdict in 2006, Anthony has steadfastly proclaimed his innocence, asserting he will not apologize for a crime he did not commit. A wave of protests has erupted, advocating for Anthony, demanding the commutation of his death sentence and the opportunity for an evidentiary hearing. Anthony Sanchez resided at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester before his eventual execution by lethal injection on September 21, 2023.